He's Randy Smallwood. He is CEO and president of Wheaton Precious Metals. He was also Business in Vancouver's 2019 CEO of the Year. I don't think us at Kitco acknowledged the award, but belated congrats, Randy Smallwood.
Thank you, Michael.
I
Always
think
good.
you've had
Always a
even
pleasure to be here.
I think you've had even a more successful 2020.
Yeah, it's been with all the challenges, as a company, I've done relatively well, and of course, precious metals are always good in times of challenge, and these are definitely times of challenge. So, yes, it's a good time to be in the precious metals business.
Let's talk about cycles in the mining market. You were very good when we talked to you back in September, talking about the cycles that you are and how you actually act as a business. Can you talk about what the cycle is right now in the mining industry?
Well, it sure feels like we've shifted a bit to development side. We started this business just over 15 years ago, back as the original Silver Wheaton. So we've been around for a while, and what we've seen is that generally money going back into the ground, feeding development, feeding growth, is where we spend most of our time. Of course, if any commodity that has cyclical pricing, there are times to harvest and not to acquire. And so as I say, there's sort of three phases of the business cycle in streaming, and that is feeding or funding development projects and funding growth, and then what I would call the harvest phase, and then there's the balance sheet repair phase, which usually follows the harvest phase, and it's basically helping stressed balance sheets from companies that were investing when commodity prices were high and are having to deal with that. I think we've come out of that balance sheet repair phase, although there still are a few companies out there that have stressed balance sheets. But we are seeing definitely a lot more opportunities where it's to fund growth, to fund expansions, and to help companies replace the reserves and resources that have been mined over the last few years. And so happy about that because, of course, it opens up all sorts of opportunities for us as a company.
We're in this up phase right now, but can you talk about anything that is kind of different from past up phases? Obviously that we have the pandemic right now. I think that there's been some people that have been commenting that there's a little slowness on the M&A side compared to what's been happening with China.
Well, one of the challenges that we have seen, of course, is the challenge of being able to conduct due diligence, being able to visit sites and get comfortable with how operations are running, and having to sort of put faith in distant engineers and consulting groups isn't something that we'd like to do. And so our approach has been, fortunately, we did get a couple of good site visits in, and we're still very active on that front. And we can always set up contingent deals and stuff. But that's been the biggest challenge in today's world in terms of the business side is working within this pandemic. And of course, the whole pandemic, it's one of the more important aspects of making sure that our employees are safe and providing support to our partners. We did set up a COVID response fund to provide some additional support to our partners and help them again strengthen social license, but more importantly provide some support at the front lines in areas. And so especially rural areas where some of the challenges are even more profound than what we've seen in the cities. But yeah, it's a healthy market right now for companies. There still is an active interest in growing. There's still a need for base metals and for precious metals, of course, and so see lots of opportunities.
Let's keep with that COVID-19 theme. You're an international company. You see the impacts from around the world. Can you talk about what you've seen for local businesses, or kind of how the services that you would see around miners, say, down in Latin America or overseas?
Well, it's been obviously South America and Latin America is still having some significant challenges with growth in infection rates in this COVID-19 pandemic. But what we have seen is companies really step up the controls around the mine sites to ensure that we limit risk as much as we can. And fortunately, mine sites are typically in pretty remote locations, which does give you some benefits with respect to controlling access and limiting exposure. and overall reducing risk. And so we've seen very, very active campaigns. We did have some suspensions in operations in both Mexico and Peru. But again, we saw some good, strong response back in terms of putting systems in place, and those operations are now all back up and running and getting closer back to full capacity again. It is something that's incredibly important. This is the time when we're quite thankful about the quality of the assets that we invest into. The bulk of our production comes from the first quartile. Close to 3/4 of our production comes from the first quartile of the respective cost curve. So what that means is that these mines, they are profitable for us, but they are also very profitable, obviously, for our partners, but also for the jurisdictions and the communities. These are the mines that generate wealth to so many different stakeholders all the way across the board. And when we look at the economic impacts of this pandemic and the responses that we've had to put in place, I tell you, economic stimulus from a mine is probably one of the best methods and ways of sort of rebuilding some of these economies around the world. And so the fact that we've got remote locations where we have some advantages with respect to being able to limit and control the risk, combined with the benefits that we deliver from being first quartile assets that generate substantive benefits and value to all stakeholders, it all adds up to being in an excellent position to manage our way through this crisis.
Do we have a sense of what production is going to look like from the effects of this pandemic?
Yeah, from our perspective, we lost about 30% of our production for about a 2-month period in the second quarter. Now, fortunately, we had a pretty healthy produced but not yet delivered inventory built up that will satisfy us on the sales side. So from a cash flow perspective, our second quarter actually is probably going to be in pretty good shape. The production, of course, will be a bit lighter, and that's probably going to have more of an impact in our third quarter financials than it will in our second quarter financials. But all in all, a 30% impact for 2 months all likely equates to about a 5% impact over the course of the year. We're hopeful that we should be able to come up with updated guidance when we come up with our second quarter results in about a month.
You made some news with the Caldas deal. Can you talk about the impact on the production profile going forward?
Well, it's a pretty small transaction now in terms of the amount of gold that we receive from it, because they're working in the upper zone. And what's really exciting about Caldas is the lower zone at Marmato. Marmato has excellent exploration potential, and some of the deep drilling that Caldas has done looks very promising. This is a very deep-seated, very classic sort of low sulfidation epithermal. It's actually going into moderate sulfidation epithermal and mesothermal systems at depth. It's a good, strong system that shows excellent tenor. If anything, I'd say the grades actually look better at depth. And so we're really excited about the lower zone and the development that's going to be associated to that. And so as they work their way through and begin construction on that and bring that on stream, that's where that project is going to show some great promise. It's a district. Colombia has shown plenty of promise. I've seen a number of other great successes in that part of the Andes, and I am fully expecting that Marmato is going to continue to deliver on that front.
Can you talk about Wheaton Precious Metals' contribution, or how you're helping out communities in the face of COVID-19?
Well, Wheaton has long been a supporter of our partners and the communities around the mines that we get our metal from, and have had very strong active community support programs. But given the precious metals sector showing the strength that it has of late, and then looking at the impacts of this pandemic, in April we decided to announce a $5 million fund, $5 million US fund, to provide additional support to people that are at most impact from this pandemic. And so 20% of that went to the communities where our employees work, which is here in Western Canada and down in the Cayman Islands. But the other 80%, so $4 million US, is being put into communities around the mine sites and working with our partners to try and provide support. And this is support in terms of medical equipment, in terms of medical supplies, frontline personal protective equipment, just trying to strengthen up, and then food banks for those that have lost the jobs or lost main sources of income as activities have been suspended. And so happy to report that the bulk of that has already been put to work. I think we're about 85% invested so far, and going to be putting more in. I'm hopeful that this is the only time we have to do this. But this is an important time for charity, and there's no doubt that we in the precious metals industry are probably faring a little bit better than most in this world, and so it's time to give a little back.
Randy, we're always glad to have you on, but I think it's well timed because we're starting to see silver show some signs of life right now, and that's obviously the origins of the company that you run. Can you tell us how silver is looking right now from the industrial sides and from the investment sides?
Well, and again, in these times when antibacterial applications of metal, we see a lot of talk about copper and how useful it is in terms of managing this. But I tell you, silver actually does a better job than copper. And so we continue to see strong growth on the industrial side. Silver is being consumed in all the high technology applications. It conducts electricity more efficiently than any other noble metal. And so there's always going to be a demand for it. And on top of that, it's got the strongest antibacterial and antimicrobial benefit or attributes in terms of fighting that. So we just see continued growth in mobile electronics and solar panels, in water purification systems, continued increase in demand for silver. And in today's world, I would see even more demand for that. So you combine that with the fact that silver production has hit its peak. We have seen peak silver in years past, and so there's a decreasing supply from the mining side, mainly because most silver comes from lead zinc mines, and lead zinc pricing has not been very strong of late, and so there's not a lot of investment into that space. I can tell you, we spend more time studying the base metal sector because that's where we get most of our precious metal streams, is from base metal mines. And lead zinc just hasn't seen any significant investments for a long time now, and so we see shrinking supply combined with increasing demand. That's always the perfect recipe for strength in commodity prices. Silver always lags gold, and gold has definitely taken a run. It's consistently banging off of 1,800 or jumping over $1,800 an ounce. But we're finally starting to see silver show some strength. And so, as I said, the recipe is perfect for good, strong silver prices over the next while. It's about 35% of our revenues right now. 35 to 40% of our revenues come from silver. Hopefully, if we see stronger prices, that percentage of revenue will climb.
Randy Smallwood, thank you very much for your time and speaking with Kitco.
Always a pleasure, Michael, always.